Formula One fans, another sensational scandal just exploded. Yet another scandal looms in Formula One's world, and it's one that strongly recalls other episodes already happened and hidden. I repeat, by now in my recent videos, there's almost always a behind-the-scenes story that doesn't emerge in current Formula One. We saw it with the Mini DRS affair where the FIA managed to hold back, gifting the championship to McLaren in 2024. But history repeats itself because whoever hides dust under the carpet only makes things dirtier. So here we are facing the new skid block scandal. Revealing it is a post from Amertime who talks about it first in Italy, picking up news from Japanese site Autosport Web. Shadows on some teams, skid blocks in the crosshairs. Basically, what happened? It happened that during Brazil's sprint race, so we're told, but probably this was in the air for quite some time, they noticed that Joe Bauer, the FIA delegate, the one who has responsibility for Formula One checks, reportedly was struck by the quantity of sparks being produced by some cars. He reportedly intervened after the sprint ended, before Formula One championship qualifying, to block some systems that would bring heat to Formula One's skid blocks, allowing thermal expansion, therefore volume increase of the skid block itself. And with this allowing cars to hit the ground easily without the system realizing it. Skid blocks are those titanium plates placed precisely at the attachment points of skid block fixing on the car's floor. If I clearly increase these skid blocks' volume, I increase their height and manage to make the car hit the ground without the plank realizing it. Bringing this effect through using a heat source connected with the skid itself is a clearly irregular procedure. We have the plank, which is a wooden board. In quotes, it's a composite material. It's much more complicated than that. There are also skid blocks, which are nothing but instruments inserted inside the plank, serving to protect to safeguard its thickness, which by regulation must be 10 millimeters, but also to act as cushion and guarantee the plank's own measurement, which cannot be worn more than 1 millimeter, with a tolerance of 1/5 millimeter. What would Formula One teams have done? They reportedly installed a device that accumulates heat in the skid block area, which, as consequence of thermal expansion, would expand downward. And touching the asphalt would be capable of protecting the plank, protecting its wear, and therefore guaranteeing full legality of the component. So that the Federation, once it measures the plank's thickness, wouldn't detect anything anomalous. How did Joe Bauer notice? Almost everyone in Brazil noticed very strange things. Not only cars beyond historical exclusions, but we noticed rather particular performances. Could it depend on the fact it was a sprint race? Therefore, only one free practice session? Many more uncertainties? Impossibility to work on cars in depth? Joe Bauer, after the sprint race, noticing something strange, reportedly realized something anomalous. And before Q1, he reportedly caught many cars, therefore many different teams. I tell you immediately, there's not a single accused. There are many suspects. And this Japanese outlet reporting the news isn't specific, doesn't go into detail because evidently something isn't known. But the scandalous thing is that first of all, they block all these systems bringing heat irregularly to Formula One, but no team gets disqualified. What's striking, what truly outrages and causes bewilderment on our part, is that teams in question weren't ordered to eliminate from cars these irregular skid heating systems, with disqualifications that would have made sense. They even should have been retroactive. So Joe Bauer and the FIA announced a technical directive immediately prohibiting such systems use. But what sense does a technical directive make that should render cars regulation compliant 3 races from the end of a Formula One regulatory cycle? It's clear they prefer continuing to sweep dust under the carpet and hide it rather than intervening with disqualifications against those clearly behaving irregularly. If you need a technical directive to prohibit them, it means today they're not illegal. So, if they're not illegal, for what reason did you ask teams to remove them? Assuming anyway, it's a device in many quotes because one thing is having installed something reacting to heat, therefore moving the skid block downward. Or there are systems fundamentally going to take heat emanated by radiators or power unit generally, so that it then flows toward the floor generating additional overheating precisely of titanium plates. Where was McLaren's reaction during Baku 2024 championship, where victory was even homologated. And then in the same way, a technical directive was issued saying mini DRS is prohibited. Now Red Bull loses performance during Brazilian Grand Prix main race qualifying. Now we understand reasons for this performance loss. However, remains disappointment of missed FIA intervention that carefully avoids disqualifying. The FIA, however, intervened to block the very high performance level that the 2022 F175 had with that porpoising, as if the problem was caused precisely by Ferrari. What reportedly triggered an alarm bell would have been the slowness with which drivers then returned to the pits. The Federation can check cars both after races and in other official weekend moments, for example during qualifying. They stop you at pit entrance, there's weighing and other checks. It seems the overheating of that skid block area that would then act as cushion would obviously return the moment thermal expansion, and therefore heat cease. Heat ceases and the skid block essentially returns upward, and therefore that illegality you'd notice if you measured the car at a certain moment, typically when running on track, no longer manifests, so it's a thermal expansion trick that returns and can somehow be concealed simply by waiting several minutes. Drivers returning to pits slowly to avoid being stopped in case they're unlucky enough to be stopped in pit lane. But despite this, Joe Bauer noticed it. There's a lack of transparency that's not good because at this point, it's unclear. Let's take the operation type with a grain of salt and therefore reach the point, namely, team's necessity not to wear the plank. We know perfectly well technicians work on those gray areas, precisely unregulated, allowing you to do some types of tricks. But I repeat, I'm very angry with the Federation. If you found something wrong, regardless of gray area, black area, regulation, or other, but if you ask teams to remove those devices, it means at that moment, right or wrong it may be, according to your head, you detected an anomaly. And then you must disqualify. Disqualify them all. Because the fact all used this device, or only some, but in any case the fact multiple teams used it, doesn't mean if everyone or almost everyone uses it, then it became legal. This is what I want to make clear. It's unclear. If multiple teams worked in this gray area but the Federation doesn't like it, why not intervene firmly? This is yet another scandal demonstrating how Formula One needs greater transparency. We cannot continue seeing situations where potentially irregular devices get blocked without consequences for those who use them. We cannot accept championships being decided also by these shadow zones. The FIA must clarify, must make sharp decisions. Either it's illegal and you disqualify, or it's legal and fine for everyone. But this middle situation, this continuous gray area, this hiding and then blocking at the last moment, isn't acceptable. Fans deserve to know, teams deserve clear rules, and drivers deserve to compete on equal terms. The pattern is becoming disturbingly clear. We see the same story repeating, devices operating in gray areas, the FIA noticing but not acting decisively, technical directives issued without penalties, championships potentially affected by unclear enforcement. The mini DRS situation was identical. A device arguably exploiting regulations, used successfully, championship implications, then quietly blocked without retroactive action. Now, skid block heating systems following the same script. How many more times will this happen? What makes this particularly egregious is the timing. 3 races from season's end, after these systems potentially influenced an entire championship battle, suddenly they're prohibited. But no penalties, no disqualifications, no acknowledgement that rules may have been bent for months. Joe Bauer's intervention after noticing excessive sparking shows the FIA can identify problems when they want to. The question is why they don't act decisively when they do. If something is wrong enough to require immediate prohibition, surely it's wrong enough to have been wrong all along. The slow pit returns reportedly used to allow skid blocks cooling and returning to normal height before checks perfectly illustrates the problem. Teams found a loophole not just in regulations but in enforcement procedures themselves, and when caught, they face no consequences. Multiple teams reportedly involved suggest this wasn't one team's clever innovation but widespread practice throughout the paddock. Which raises even more questions. How long has this been happening? How much has it affected results? Which teams benefited most? The thermal expansion principle is ingenious from engineering perspective. Heat causes titanium to expand, lowering the skid block, allowing the car to run lower, generating more downforce, all while technical checks show legal plank wear because the expansion reverses after cooling. Brilliant, but clearly against regulation spirit. What's particularly frustrating is the FIA's inconsistency. They aggressively policed Ferrari's porpoising solutions in 2022, issuing mid-season regulation changes that hurt Ferrari's performance. Yet here, with multiple teams potentially exploiting thermal expansion for months, they issue a quiet technical directive without penalties. This double standard erodes trust in the sport. Fans, teams, drivers, everyone deserves consistent enforcement. If regulations are sacred enough to change mid-season when one team excels, they're sacred enough to enforce with disqualifications when multiple teams cheat. The argument that it's a gray area doesn't hold water. If the FIA asked teams to remove these systems before issuing a technical directive, they clearly considered them problematic. Gray area or not, if you're ordered to remove something, that's de facto acknowledgement of illegality. And let's be clear about what this means. If these systems provided significant performance advantage and multiple championship contending teams use them, then championship results may have been influenced by illegal devices. That's not a gray area, that's a crisis. The solution is simple: transparency and consistent enforcement. When the FIA finds problematic devices, investigate thoroughly, determine legality clearly, and if illegal, disqualify accordingly. No quiet fixes, no technical directives without penalties, no sweeping under carpets.